Good evening, everybody. Sorry that it's not live tonight. We're having some technical login issues with Facebook. Of course, I'm sure no one's ever had that sort of problem. But anyway, we'll get it put up. Sorry for the inconvenience. We're starting a new series tonight. We're starting a new series on Psalms. On our Facebook page, I put a notice out there that we're not going to cover all of the Psalms. That'd take us quite a few years to cover them all, and would probably drag on quite a bit. But we are going to cover some select Psalms, a lot of them dealing with the Messianic Psalms, and some of them tied to specific occasions that they were used for. But I'd just like to start out tonight kind of giving an overview of Psalms. It's different. Y'all know it's different from the rest of the books in the Bible. First of all, there's more authors in Psalms than the others. And it's written by different people. Some we don't know a whole lot about, and we have some of them that they call orphan Psalms, because we don't know exactly who wrote some of them. And we'll explain some of that. But as we get started here, Psalms is called a lot of different things, but one of them that really stuck with me very well, it's called the hymnal by some. It's referred to as, it's kind of like what our hymnal is. It was the Nation of Israel's hymnal and book of devotion, as I have it here on the screen, for the Jewish congregation. It's kind of interesting to think that, first of all, most of these, if not all of them, were actually sung, and different musical, and I have some information in tonight's things about some of the different words used of how they were supposed to be sung and so forth. We know, like for instance, Psalm 95 was sung when the ark was moved from the tabernacle, from the tent, to the temple. And we can actually place some of these different things. And it's pretty neat. Psalms, if you just look at it and read it, there's a lot there. But when you get a better understanding of how it was used, it even brings some more meaning into it. So that's one of the really nice things about Psalms. But just getting started off, let's give a little bit of history first about it real quick. Psalms, and I'm going to have used the slides here quite a bit tonight if you're taking notes. And for next week, I'm going to print some of these out if you'd like to keep them in your Bible or wherever you keep some of that stuff. But Psalms was written over a period of time of roughly 1,000 years. So, as far as when the book of Psalms was written, it's obviously the longest it took to write and has the most writers. It started out with Moses. And actually, it could be, please recognize my verbiage there, the psalm that Moses wrote could be the actual first book that he wrote, even before Genesis and stuff. We don't know. But it's a possibility. He knew who God was and everything like that, and obviously could have written this. And most of this, we need to keep in mind, is Hebrew poetry. And we know our poetry is different than what the Hebrews were used to. First of all, roses are red, violets are blue. I thought, okay, you better behave or I'm going to get you. I don't know. There's a million and one of those little rhyming things. First of all, they weren't doing the rhyming thing. The waxing poetically, it's not like that. Another thing to keep in mind, there are things we cannot pick up on because of the translation in their poetry. As an example, there are some psalms that all start out with one letter, then the next, then the next, then the next, then the next of the Hebrew alphabet. And that doesn't mean anything to us because we can't see it because we're not reading it in Hebrew. So there's many things that when you think about poetry, it's not not Poe, and it'd be Edgar Allan Poe, or another famous poet.
Shelley.
Thank you. And Karen's going, where are you going with this? Karen's my wife, for those of you who don't know. She's back there going, huh? Sorry. But it is Hebrew poetry. But don't let the term poetry, don't wrap today's poetry around what the Psalms are. Okay? The authors, let's just kind of jump in a little bit and talk about the authors of the Psalms. The most prolific writer of the Psalms, as you probably already know, is David, King David. He's attributed to 73 of the Psalms. That's almost half, which is he was prolific. He was a prolific writer. Moses has one, as we talked about a minute ago. Solomon has a few, and I've listed them out here. The sons of Korah have multiple. We also have three here. The interesting, the writers here were all actually had musicians in the temple. And they also wrote psalms. Well, if you think about it, they're singing these psalms. These are like our hymnal book, per se. I mean, they don't actually have individual notes written in them, but there are notes of how they're supposed to be sung. High, low, different speeds. There are musical annotations attached with some of these. So it would make sense. And all three of these actually were put in place by King David. And I actually have a little bit more on, obviously the others, we're familiar with the sons of Korah and David and Solomon and Moses, but these were not quite as familiar with. So I put just a little bit more information about this. And we see he was Asaph, I think, was a descendant of Levi, and he's obviously of a Levi. Levi was his great-grandfather, or grandfather, I'm sorry. He's known as one of the three Levites commissioned by David to oversee singing in the house of the tabernacle. He was also mentioned later on in singing at the dedication, a couple different places right there. The First Chronicles 6 is where they're commissioned, all three of them. Heman was the grandson of Samuel, and is the chief musician appointed by David to serve in the tabernacle and then the temple. Of course, obviously, David didn't assign him to the temple since it wasn't built, but Solomon, he continued his role there, and Solomon kept him on. Ethan was another musician appointed by David to the tabernacle and then to the temple. And for what it's worth, Asaph was basically the assistant of Heman. So we have these three guys that play very, very, very important roles in the music that's sung in the tabernacle and the temple and the writing psalms. Why? Because psalms were sung at different times. There are still some psalms today that are sung at different periods on the Jewish calendar. So, I mean, these were very prevalent then and today. So it's something that's I think it's kind of neat. A lot of times we don't really look at it. I often wonder, and have wondered over the last few weeks when I was getting into this, what somebody would think 2,000 years from now if everything got scrambled up and they found our hymnals, and they could read them. Wow. Okay. Interesting. But there are some psalms we just don't know who wrote. We can speculate, but we don't know exactly who wrote them. And for that, in addition, there are structures. Psalms was not one book by the Hebrews; it was actually 5 different books. And here is exactly how they were broken out into smaller books. And it's funny if you, no, not funny, but interesting. If you look in our hymnals in the back, they have it broken down into sections in the bigger book. This section is praise. This section is joy, or this section is salvation. Different what the songs, quote unquote, are about. So they actually had this broken out as well. There's multiple categories of psalms as well. Psalms of praise, and I have a lot of them listed here. I'll take this and either print this out for next week or email it out to everybody. There's psalms of instruction. I mean, really, it's do this, do this, do this, do this. Ethical psalms, psalms of worship, penitential. Somebody help me with that word. There are penitential psalms, imprecatory psalms, messianic psalms. We're not going to cover all of them as we talked about because there are so many, but we certainly are going to cover. There's a lot of important psalms, especially psalms that we see used in the New Testament, and especially psalms used by Jesus in different areas. We're going to kind of concentrate on those, and I'll reflect back as to where they were used, how they were used, and so forth. This one here is what I was talking about a few minutes ago. There are, and if you open up your Bible to Psalms, you'll note, you will see, I should say, in the underneath the Psalm, well, not all of them, as I turn to one that doesn't have anything there. If you look at a psalm, a lot of them have headings or quote-unquote titles or who they were by. And they also will have different names there. Like 78 is a maskil of Asaph. And that basically is a contemplation of one of the chief musicians. The most... like a Mizmor or Shir or Mizmor Shir. These are different things. You'll see them right underneath where it's labeled. Like Psalms 58 here we have, for the director of music to the tune of Do Not Destroy of David Amiktim, which is a golden psalm or prayer, one that was believed to have been repeated often and at specific times on the steps leading into the temple. So there's a lot of different things about the individual psalms themselves. We're all very, very familiar with some of the psalms. If I was asking you to name a psalm, which one would you name? 23rd Psalm. Everybody, that's like the one everybody knows, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But there's a lot in the Psalms. There's a lot we don't necessarily cover, and we don't know different things about them. And as we move on, one of the specific things, some people have called into the question the reliability of the titles. And when I'm referring to the titles here, I'm talking about like right here on 23. It says a Psalm of David. That's its quote unquote title. And we talked about 58 just a minute ago. That was the title is For the Director of Music to the Tune of Do Not Destroy of David Mitham. There's some people that, first of all, they go way back, all the way back to antiquity. But we don't know for certain that they were part of the original text. Someone may have wrote it, like Nathan may have wrote it, and it's going along, and he's died. He may not have put his name on it, and he goes along, and generation of people are like, "Well, I know Nathan wrote that. Well, let's write that down." So they added it to it, but it's we can't guarantee it, but it goes way, way, way back, and we know the Jews, the Israelites, used them because they actually were generally the first verse of the psalm, believe it or not. So their Hebrew Bible would not necessarily line up with verse to verse wise with what we are using today. The Septuagint says the meanings of the titles have been forgotten. It says there the titles are part of the actual text. Actually, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll pass these out, instances in the New Testament where they refer to the Old Testament, and they refer to the point where the titles have to have been right. Well, David wrote in blank. Well, the title says David wrote. Or, well, like right here, if they refer to a Psalm of David and it's referred to in the New Testament, they're saying David wrote that psalm. You see what I'm talking about there? But there's a good case that can be made that they are correct. There's a good case that can be made that they are correct. And we'll just, for the moment, we'll just leave it right there. So let's go ahead. First of all, any questions or thoughts about the background of Psalms itself, or how it was put together? Yeah.
Did Jerome include the Psalms in the Vulgate?
They are in the Latin Vulgate.
Originally in 400? Okay.
Originally in 400?
400.
I'll need to confirm that. I will need to confirm that. I know it was in the Septuagint, and I am pretty sure they are in the Vulgate, but I can't say if they have always been, because even today they update things. You know how they do that. But that's an easy one I can research this weekend. Be glad to let you know. Others? Okay. All right then. So I hope that y'all, I hope you find the enjoyment out of some of these that I do. And I misquoted a moment ago. I said Psalms 95. I meant Psalms 96 was the psalm where, and if y'all will turn there, we're going to read through this real quick. It's the first one I was going to touch on tonight. It was sung when both times the ark was taken from the tabernacle, the tent, to the temple. So I'm going to dive in here real quick, and it says, "Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth." I'm not talking about just Israel. "Sing to the Lord, praise His name, proclaim His salvation day after day, declare His glory among the nations, His marvelous deeds among all people." And that's the first 3 verses. Now, this is sung at a very important time. if you think about it. What are they saying here? First of all, in the nation of Israel at the time, they referred to the Gentiles as the nations. Okay? Did you hear what he's singing there? Sing to the Lord, praise his name, proclaim his salvation day after day, declare his glory among the Gentiles, is what they're singing. His marvelous deeds among who? All people. See, this wasn't when we have in Acts 10. Sorry, got overzealous there. My computer started sliding. In Acts 10 there, when Peter is there and the Holy Spirit falls on the Gentiles, and he's like, oh, we get it now. All right, Jesus is for the Gentiles as well. They should have known this. This has never been a secret per se, trying to hide the fact that eventually the Gentiles would be accepted into the kingdom. Right there's verbiage among verbiage in the Old Testament, speaking to and attesting to the fact that the Gentiles would be brought in. At this time, what were they talking about? Go convert them. This is what they're saying. Proselytes, which are people who were Gentiles that became Jewish. Okay? That happened. They were supposed to be going out. Remember, they were a light to the nations. They weren't supposed to keep God to themselves. They weren't supposed to, we don't want y'all. We don't want y'all part of this. That happened, but that wasn't the plan. So I'm going to pick back up here in verse 4. It says, for great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the nations are idols. All the Gentile gods are idols, is what they're saying there. But the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and glory are in his sanctuary. Ascribe to the Lord, all you families of nations. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Did y'all catch that? They just told the nations, the Gentiles, to bring an offering, come into his courts. That's kind of shocking verbiage coming from Jews, at least of the time that Jesus was on the earth. Remember, good Jews at the time, remember we're talking about a woman of Samaria, the Samaritan woman? They hated the Samaritans so bad, good Jews wouldn't even walk through Samaria. They wouldn't even get the dust of Samaria or the people on their clothes. They would go out across the Jordan, come down and come back across to keep from walking through there. That's how bad they hated the nations. And yet here we have them saying, hey y'all, come on. Bring a sacrifice. Come into the courts. Picking up again in verse 9, it says, worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. Tremble before him, all the earth, everybody. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. The world is firmly established. It cannot be removed. He will judge the peoples with equity. Let the heavens rejoice. Let the earth be glad. Let the sea resound and all that is in it. Let the fields be jubilant and everything in them. Let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. Let all creation rejoice the Lord, for he comes. He comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples in his faithfulness. So what we have here, if we think about it, starting out, they're saying, all the earth, sing it to the Lord. Hey, y'all need to be part of this. Y'all need to be part of this. Remember when they sang it? They're moving the Ark of the Covenant. They're saying, all the earth come, all you nations come. Y'all need to be part of this. And they're ending up with, let all creation rejoice before the Lord, for He comes. He comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples in His faithfulness. So we have if you didn't realize what was going on there, if you didn't think of, if you haven't really read Psalms 95, that's just kind of out there in Psalms, and you don't know the backstory of Psalms 96, thank you. I don't know why I call it 95 all the time, but 96, you don't know the backstory and the importance of it, and the fact that it was sung at a very important time, and what they're saying in it. They're saying the Lord's incredible. All you nations, y'all need to be rejoicing in the Lord. Y'all need to bring a sacrifice. All you Gentiles, y'all need to be bringing a sacrifice into the courts. Could you imagine the Pharisees doing that? Or the Sadducees? Really? Think about that. What is in the Psalms, in the Old Testament, and they're reaching out to the nations. I mean, isn't that incredible? They didn't. I'm sure some did. I shouldn't say they didn't. I'm sure there was some that were doing the right thing. All in all, Israel is supposed to be the light of the world. God's chosen people. They were supposed to be the light on the hill, bringing people to God, and they tried to keep Him to themselves. And this one, and that one, and this one. Thus, a lot of what happened in the Old Testament, where they were sent into captivity because they didn't do what they were told. The destruction of Jerusalem because they didn't do what they were told. But isn't it cool seeing all the way back then, God going, hey, y'all need to be including those people. I think it's pretty cool. There's a lot of Psalms that are just like this. We've got ones that talk about Jesus. Well, quite a few of them. We've got Psalms that talking about Jesus and the Hebrew stage. Remember we talked about the order of Melchizedek? How he was a priest before the priesthood was even established under Levi. And Jesus was a priest in the order of Melchizedek. That's in 110. That's one of them we'll cover and talk about it. There's some great stuff in Psalms. I hope y'all are able to join us as much as you can. For the people online that are watching this, I'm really going to try to make sure they're all streamed live. We've just been having my phone update. You know how it is. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up tonight unless anybody has any questions. All right, I'm going to stop this recording.